The following program includes graphic images and mature subject matter intended for adult audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Tonight on 16 by 9, disturbing stories
He came around and he pulled down my shorts and he started fondling me.
of an Alberta psychiatrist charged and convicted of sexually assaulting patients.
You're going to be officially charged with that sexual assault they told you about.
Who was approved to work in Canada.
The assaults never had to happen in the first place if the bodies in charge, the police, the college, had done their jobs.
Despite a very questionable past.
Your arms would like twist and contort because the muscles were contracting. And it was pretty harrowing.
And this guy
You just have to forget that, it's gonna hurt.
will change everything you thought you knew about ballet.
The hardest part about this particular role is you have to go insane.
And ballet dancers. Here's Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and welcome to 16 by 9. As a doctor, Aubrey Levine had it all. He was a highly regarded psychiatrist, an expert witness in criminal cases, and a university professor. But there was another side to Levine, one he kept hidden for years. That is, until he was convicted of sexually assaulting 3 of his patients. Since then, 16 by 9 has learned there is a lot more to Levine's story. A controversial past in his homeland of South Africa that should have been a red flag to Canadian authorities, but wasn't. With interviews on 2 continents, we unravel the story of a man some call Dr. Shock. On a cold night in Calgary, Aubrey Levine leaves a courtroom branded a sex predator. His career in ruins.
After so many assaults, it's just numb. I was like a walking zombie.
And this is the man who brought him down. A man we can only identify by his initials, RB. For years, he says he was molested by his own doctor, Levine.
He knew all too well the damage he was causing. He didn't care. Didn't give a shit.
It was all caught on tape. This graphic video, taken by RB himself, was the most crucial piece of evidence. For 14 minutes, we see Levine fondling his patient. According to RB's lawyer, Richard Edwards, it should have never come to this.
A lot of people turned a blind eye to the type of person and to the type of doctor that Dr. Levine was. And people paid for that, and they suffered.
RB was in prison when Levine was first assigned to him. He was the perfect victim. He had a history of mental illness, addictions, and a 5-page rap sheet. What was he like?
He was very nice. He put me on a bunch of medication. Then he told me once I got released that he could get me on disability assistance.
So this man seemed like a positive figure in your life initially.
Yeah, very positive.
It almost sounds like Dr. Levine was cultivating his patients.
Oh, very much. I think he was looking for a certain personality type. I think he was looking for people that were looking for a friend.
Levine was an expert in treating criminals. The government assigned him to hundreds of files. RB was one of them. So when RB was paroled, he assumed he was in good hands. Their first meeting outside jail was here at the Peter Lougheed Hospital.
We talked. He asked me some questions, then he told me he needed to examine me. As soon as he came around and he started touching my stomach and then down undid my pants and then pulled down my shorts and he started, you know, fondling me and feeling me and telling me about sensitive areas all the time. And
You thought maybe he was trying to help you still?
well, I thought maybe, what else could it be? Why would he do that? Because I didn't know what else to think.
RB says by the time he realized something was wrong, he felt trapped.
And I started to think, no one's gonna believe me. In a million years, never.
Did you ever say stop?
No,
Why not?
I was scared. Scared of what would happen. Scared to tell, because I know I'd be in bigger trouble.
You thought it was your word against his and his word would win.
I wouldn't say thought, I would say I knew.
And so RB says for years, the assaults continued.
Mostly at night. There was no staff. It was like a deserted place. There was no one, just him.
RB maintains that despite all the abuse, he felt he had no choice but to keep going back.
The threat to RB was simply that if he didn't go to Dr. Levine, he'd be right back in jail.
Be sexually abused or go back to jail in this case.
I think that's a fair statement.
The tipping point came in 2010 when RB finally decided there was only one way to put an end to his ordeal. He had to catch Levine in the act. He bought a hidden camera tucked inside a wristwatch and wore it to his next session. The footage was damning. Crown Prosecutor William Wister.
It's uncomfortable to watch. It is an act that you find unbelievable initially.
It was enough for police to arrest Levine.
Good morning. If you could just have a seat on the couch for me, please. You're going to be officially charged with that sexual assault they told you about.
Levine's explanation? That he was merely testing RB for erectile dysfunction.
I'm guessing you're qualified to treat erectile dysfunction based on your background.
When I worked in South Africa, we did just about everything. Some would say it was a land of medical cowboys because we used to learn to do everything.
But when the detective showed him the spy watch video, Levine retreated into a shell of silence.
And you can see how a layperson would look at that. What it looks like to me, it looks like masturbation.
Yes, yes.
And you can see where the confusion would be.
Yes, yes.
Right?
But RB wasn't Levine's only accuser. After he came forward, 20 others did too, alleging they were also assaulted by Levine. One of them even reported it to police a full year before RB's ordeal became public. But no charges were laid.
How is it that he complained to police in March 2009 and this doctor was allowed to continue practicing psychiatry?
You're asking the wrong person.
Should that not have been a massive red flag?
To somebody, it should have been.
And then, another red flag. A complaint 9 years ago from a patient who felt uncomfortable. It prompted a superior to warn Levine about the risk of conducting physical exams without a third party present.
That implies the hospital knew physical examinations were happening.
It does, and it's disturbing.
Edwards says it didn't stop there.
We understand that a number of people complained to both the Calgary Police Service and to the college.
And nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
Because those warnings weren't heeded, Edwards has launched a civil suit on RB's behalf.
The assaults never had to happen in the first place if the bodies in charge, the police, the college, had done their jobs.
Among those accused of being negligent in his statement of claim, the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons. Its registrar, Trevor Thiemann.
How do you respond to this?
In our statement of defense, which says we're quite confident that we will be found to have acted properly with respect to these charges.
Did you receive complaints from patients and other physicians while Dr. Levine was licensed?
That information is protected. I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that about Dr. Levine or any other physician about whom you would ask questions.
But there was more in Aubrey Levine's past that the college would have to consider, like his notorious background in South Africa, a history that was about to resurface.
Next, uncovering the dark past.
All the gay guys told us that the first thing he had requested was for them to strip naked in his office.
Of the man they called the Colonel.
I would almost call him psychopathic.
The following program includes graphic images and mature subject matter intended for adult audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
If Aubrey Levine's life is a play in 2 acts, the first one begins here, in South Africa, in a time of apartheid and oppression, when Aubrey Levine practiced psychiatry until the mid-90s, in what he called the land of medical cowboys.
We feel that it's essential that young people be treated therapeutically in an environment close to their homes.
Levine made numerous TV appearances, but in public he said little about his trademark therapy, curing homosexuals with shock treatment.
He had earned
Dr. Shock.
Dr. Shock.
Yeah, he was called Dr. Shock.
Mickey Van Zyl is an activist who tracked human rights abuses during apartheid.
I would almost call him psychopathic. He has no sense of other people's humanity. He was this person with a huge amount of power, and he did what he wanted with it.
Levine was a psychiatrist in the South African Army. He used shock therapy on young soldiers labeled deviants, conscripts who were gay or smoked marijuana.
Their bodies were the property of the state, and Levine could do what he wanted with them.
They couldn't say no?
No, they couldn't say no, definitely not.
His patients are almost impossible to find in South Africa today. They're either dead or unwilling to talk. But there is one man who left a record behind. His name is Michael Smith, a gay conscript who has since died of AIDS, but who described his ordeal in this 2004 documentary.
So the psychiatrist, he had on his desk a big machine with all sorts of wires going in and out of it. And he connected me up to 2 of the wires that came out of it. They had little metal plates on them. They were attached right onto my forearms here and my upper and lower arms with wet bandages. So I would start talking about the pictures he would show me, and eventually the buzz would become very painful, and your arms would like twist and contort because the muscles were contracting. And it was pretty harrowing, and this would go on for about 3/4 of an hour, and then I would be given a tabletje and told to go and lie down in the ward, and we'd repeat the whole performance again the next day. It was very disorientating, I must say. I probably went into shutdown.
Levine has always insisted the shocks were mild, that it was a widely accepted practice, and that his patients gave their consent. But mild is not a word Sean Dryman would use. He was only 17 when a fellow conscript was ordered into the psychiatric ward for smoking marijuana, Ward 22, run by Levine.
Developed a good friendship with a guy called Mike, who came from Maritzburg. And he used to be sent off for the shock therapy and come back with these terrible, terrible headaches. And he went home on pass and shot himself. So it didn't
Killed himself?
He killed himself. So their therapy didn't work on him.
Gay recruits, he said, got special attention.
All the gay guys told us that the first thing he had requested was for them to strip naked in his office.
Nobody made him accountable. He just did what he wanted. He experimented as he wanted. They were captive guinea pigs that he was using.
The use of shock therapy in the military ended in the late 70s, but Levine continued to practice psychiatry in South Africa until apartheid ended. It's then he left for Canada, so quickly, according to a colleague, he didn't even clear out his desk. Soon after, he got his medical license in Saskatchewan and then Alberta. It was as South Africa began to heal that the abuses of power came to light. Levine's name and what it's alleged he did became part of the public record in a submission made by a human rights group to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It made headlines.
Have you been following this bizarre story of the attempts the old South African Defence Force made
Suspected
to
of
cure
being homosexuals were subjected to various forms of torture and degradation in the old
of
defense.
torture and abuse against homosexuals in the
Use
army.
hormone drugs, shock therapy and chemical castration to try to change their preference.
"16,000 kilometers away, Canadian officials could perhaps be excused for not seeing the headlines about Levine or the submission to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that named him. But according to sources here, there's one thing they couldn't have missed. 16 by 9 has learned one of the authors of that human rights report wrote directly to the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons, alerting them to Levine's controversial past. They say no one responded.
The college's registrar, Trevor Thiemann.
Did you receive that letter?
I can't tell you that. That information is protected under the legislation under which we operate, so I can't speak to that.
Can you tell me whether or not you even responded to the letter?
That would tell you that I received the letter, so I can't tell you that.
And there's more. In 1999, Mickey Van Zyl put the finishing touches to a report called the Aversion Project.
We wanted to document the human rights abuses. We are looking at a system, a military system, that condoned torture.
The report is a catalogue of first-hand accounts, like that of a young man who said he couldn't understand why the colonel checked my penis for hygiene during a psychiatric exam. Levine was never convicted of any crime in South Africa. His medical records show no disciplinary action, but his reputation has inspired a movie.
It is a simple question. When you were a baby, did your mother breastfeed you?
Levine's South African patients say they are still waiting for justice. But they got some closure on January 28th of this year when Levine was found guilty on 3 counts of sexual assault. He was acquitted on 2 others and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Prosecutor William Wister.
What does this case tell us about the need to screen our doctors before they are licensed in Canada?
I think we need to examine the whole system, ensure that people that we put in these highly sensitive positions are people that are reliable, capable of being trusted.
Flashbacks, yeah. I hear his voice.
For those who came into contact with Levine, the memories are haunting.
And I always put my head down and I close my eyes and I just say no.
I would prefer him to remain out of society until he dies.
When this gets out, what an effect it will have on everything that I've been associated with. I tremble to imagine the ramifications.
After 40 years on 2 continents, Aubrey Levine found himself in this small room, 74 years old, alone with his thoughts and his past, and nowhere left to hide.
Levine has appealed his 3 convictions. Another 3 cases will be retried. His medical license has also been suspended, and Alberta's Ministry of Justice is reviewing more than 400 files in which he was involved. We'll be right back.
Next, a dance of madness.
It's probably the hardest ballet I've had to tackle ever in my career.
And obsession.